Okay, so this video is going to discuss your final project for A&P. In lieu of doing a comprehensive final exam, because we've been in and out due to quarantine, or because we went virtual, because we went hybrid to traditional, back to hybrid, and then I know that a lot of you will be in and out because of state testing. I felt like a project would be a good way to wrap up our semester. This is a project that I developed years ago and I did for many years, and my students did a fantastic job with it. But I quit doing it because we kind of ran out of time. So I'm bringing it back, and that's what we're going to do for our final exam. So you will be submitting a final project as your final exam grade. So I want to talk about where it's found, what you're going to do, and then how you're going to submit it to me. So right here in our Google Classroom, you'll click on classwork, and right here, the very first thing that you should see will be your final exam project, and it will be the children's storybook project. So I'm going to pull this up for us to look at. So, like I said, years ago, I developed this and I did this for several years. And I have a nice box of old books that students did and that they kept, let me keep. And then I even have a couple of them that managed to make it into the library at the elementary school and at the middle school for students to read. And so it's a really cool project and it's going to do a great job of demonstrating that you understand one of the four systems that we've covered in the last few weeks. So what you're doing is you're writing a digital children's storybook, and you are going to do this complete with illustrations covering one of the systems that we discussed in class, and then you will present your book to me as you read it. In order for you to get full credit, you have to cover all of the topics that are listed under each one of the systems. And I'm going to show you the grading rubric as to how I will grade this. So let's look at the systems. So you can choose to do the muscular system, um, the skeletal system, the integumentary system, or the circulatory system. And so these are the different choices that you have for the topic of your storybook. So you'll pick one. You'll do a book on the muscular system and that's it. Or you may choose to do a book on the circulatory system and that's it. So you're not going to do a book that covers all four. You're doing a book that will cover one of these four topics. So, for the muscular system in your story, you have to cover these things. You've got to explain to the reader the three types of muscle tissues. You've got to explain the four muscle functions. You've got to explain what the epimysium is, fascicles, what they are, what the endomysium is. You're going to explain striated appearance, and then you're going to explain muscle contractions, what they are and how they occur. Then you'll do muscle fatigue, and finally, you will include a diagram of the muscles. So those are the topics that must be covered if you choose muscular system for your book. If you do the skeletal system, these are your topics. You will tell me the number of named bones. You will talk about the classification of bones. You will do bone function. You're going to talk about the diaphysis and the epiphysis. You're going to discuss the growth plate, bone marrow, bone development. Then you'll talk about fracture types and repair. And finally, you'll include a diagram of the skeleton. So these would be the topics that you would put in your book or the information you put in your book if you choose the skeletal system. For the integumentary system, these are your topics. So you'll talk about functions of the skin. You will discuss the layers of the skin, like the epidermis and the dermis. You'll talk about the appendages, and there's a lot of those: sweat glands, oil glands, hair, nails. You will discuss blisters and bruises. You will talk about skin pigments. And then you'll do a brief discussion on burns. Since this is a children's storybook, we don't want to be too graphic, but a brief discussion on burns. And then a diagram of the skin must be included. Then for those of you who are doing the circulatory system, these would be your topics: the blood cells, what their job, function, and types are; mononucleosis, what it is, how we heal injuries of the heart or the circulatory system, um, heart size and location, the pericardium, the chambers of the heart, blood's pathway through the heart, blood vessels, and then finally a diagram of the heart. So these would be your topics for the circulatory system. So let's talk about the formatting of your book. So your book has to be geared for a student who would be in the third or fourth grade. So these aren't like little bitty babies. These are not teenagers. These are that adolescent age, third or fourth grade. So I tell people think about like 8, 9, 10 years old. Okay. The book may be nonfiction, a nonfiction informative book, or you can do a fictional book that uses information. I've had students who did like a story of a child who, breaks a bone, and throughout the story, they're teaching that information about the skeletal system to the reader. So you get to choose. Just remember, you want it to be enjoyable to read. Okay, so that's super important. All right, so your book must have a cover, which means that since we're doing a digital book, it has to have some type of title page that when you look at it, it is enticing to read. It has a wonderful title. I can see the author of the book, the illustrator of the book, all of that information, just like if we were looking at a children's storybook. So your title must have your book, your name, and also I'm going to ask that your student number be placed on that cover as well. Your book does not need to exceed 12 pages, okay? We want it to be a children's storybook, not a novel, okay? So no more than 12 pages. You can put as much information as you want on those 12 pages. Just remember that you want your storybook to be exciting, okay? You want it to be something that would be fun to read or have read to you. So the way that I grade you is I look at age appropriateness. I'm going to look at how neat your book is, how creative you are, and I'm going to look at things like grammar and spelling. And I want you to do your best work. Since we are not doing an exam, I am expecting a top-notch storybook. I'm talking about pulling out all the stops. When I read it, I think this is, award winning. So I'm expecting fantastic work. You're going to submit your storybook via Google Classroom as well as a video of yourself reading the storybook to the Google Classroom as well. And your due date will be your exam day. So whatever date you're scheduled to take your final exam for A&P, that's the date that you need to make sure that your book has been submitted. And so if you submit it early, that's fine. You just need to make sure that it's in the Google Classroom. Check it, make sure it's sitting there, because when I go in to check them at the end of the exam days, I just need to be able to see the video and the storybook. So you'll submit all of that right here in the Google Classroom. So let's look at the rubric. So each one of you will get a rubric. 50 points of your grade is just going to come from the required information. So I'm looking that you do a good job of explaining this information, that when I read it, I know as a reader that, what you're trying to tell me. I understand the concept and how you brought it across, that you did a good job explaining it and explaining it to a younger audience. Okay. So you cover all the topics and the topics are covered well. So that right there is 50 points. So, of course, because it's a children's book, our favorite part when we were kids having someone read to us is we wanted to see the pictures. So I'm expecting some illustrations. So basically, for every page of text, I expect an illustration, something that is telling me about that information. Now, I know that you can go and get diagrams. I know that you can go and get, models, pictures of models and stuff like that and put in there. But I am going to ask that you have some original drawings in your storybook. And the way that you can do that is you can draw it, and I'm leaving typing paper for you at the front of the classroom. You can use your colored pencils and you can make a drawing, then take a picture of that, email yourself that drawing, and then you just insert it as a picture in your storybook. So I would like to see some original illustrations. In order for you to get full credit, you're going to have to include some original illustrations as well. But one illustration per page will get you your maximum points of 25 points. So the story. Of course, we want the story to be good. So I'm looking for an easy to follow plot, meaning that as you're using the different topics for your, theme that you've chosen, you need to make sure that it flows well. Don't just throw notes in there. You're telling a story. So as I'm reading it, I need to feel like I'm reading an actual story, not that I'm reading a PowerPoint or I'm reading notes just given to me choppy and that doesn't, don't connect to one another. So I want to have a plot. I want it to be very well written, which means that there's no grammatical errors, that there's no typos. Utilize spell check and grammar check on your computer to make sure that you don't have grammatical errors or typos. So if you have an easy to follow plot, it's well written, no grammatical errors or typos, right there, that's 15 points, okay? If you start to sway away from that plot line and it gets really hard to understand, or I find grammatical errors or typos, you begin to lose points. All right, and then the last 10 points is the presentation. So basically, you're going to video yourself reading your book aloud. So you can, prop your phone up and you can read the story and show the pictures, or you may opt to do a voiceover. And so if you want to do a voiceover of your book, that's perfectly fine with me. But I just need to hear you reading your book aloud. Okay, so that's very important. And then you will upload that video to the Google Classroom. And if you're not sure how to do a voiceover, or you're not sure how to do this video, Google it. There are tons of resources out there. You just have to go and find them. So if you read it well, present it professionally without giggling or stumbling all through it, you're going to get your 10 points right there. So let's talk about how you can get deductions. If you go over the 12 pages, for every page you go over, that's a 5-point deduction. Okay, so I don't want anything more than 12 pages. If you do not include at least one original illustration, and preferably I would like more, but if you don't include original illustrations, you're going to lose 15 points right there. And then if you don't have a title page, cover page for it, that's 50-point deduction, because to me the title page is the cover of the book is one of the most important things, because that's what draws you in to come in and read it. So you will submit this, and this will be your final grade or final exam for A&P. And I think it's a fantastic way for you to showcase what you learned about one of these units, and it will allow us to have a little leeway, since some of you were in and out because of quarantine, since we were all out because of virtual. And so this will give us a little bit of a cushion there. So if you didn't quite get one of these units, it's okay, because you can go and research this, or you can choose a topic that you feel a little more comfortable with. So just remember, it's very important that you get it submitted by your exam date. You have to the end of that class period to get it submitted. If you have any questions about your storybook project, feel free to email me, and I will try to email you back as quickly as I possibly can, so that way you can stay on top of things. So I look forward to reading your books, and I hope to see some fantastic works. Thank you very much.